So I have spared some of you who may have the book but haven't opened it. I've extracted and reorganized some of the sutras. By the way, speaking of words, our word suture comes from this word in Sanskrit, sutra. And what it means is just as you suture, as you use a thread to combine or to unite things, so the threads of these aphorisms unite the teaching, okay? And there's all sorts of similarities in this, and I've always found that kind of fun. Okay, so the Eightfold Path, let's take a look here in a bit. Okay, so I made the statement that the Eightfold Path is the basis for what we teach, and I'd like to illustrate that here now. We have Yama, of course, and it aligns, as I know you already know, with the first chakra at the base of the spine, correct? And so we do affirmations and chants. Yama has to do with self-restraint. Yama has to do with self-control. And affirmation is what we use, particularly, most commonly at least, in respect to overcoming negative emotions, negative habits, addictions, and so forth. We use positive affirmations. Chants are merely affirmations, particularly the chants Yogananda gave us and that we use mostly, are affirmations added to melody. Because as Swami Kriyananda points out, when you add a melody to the rhythm and the actual word and the meaning of the words, you have added a deeper level of power to the chant. Okay? Niyama, which is non-control, relates to visualizations, creative visualizations. And there's any number of, how many have ever, I'm going to stick with my theme. How many have the book, Metaphysical Meditations? Lots of you, okay. Now, I know you've all opened that book many times, but because you have, you know, it's just filled with these wonderful, usually generally brief, but I use it all the time, beautiful little guided creative visualizations, okay? I found years ago when I started teaching full-time, I was sort of shocked at myself and with my fellow devotees at the time, that because those who practice Kriya, which is a pranayam, okay, mind and breath control technique, that we, in Ananda generally, things like visualizations specifically, were generally not in use because we are trained, those who practice Kriya, to begin practicing your technique fairly quickly upon your sitting. And so when I started to have to teach these things, I said, I don't really use visualizations that much. And so I made myself do that, and I really fell in love with it. How many have ever heard, because it's a listening thing, Swami Kriyananda had used to be a cassette, and then it became a CD, I don't know what it is now, called Metaphysical Meditations, in which he recorded some of Yogananda's guided visualizations to a background of classical music. I just love that CD, okay? And my favorite one is the poem Samadhi to the Herbert Holt's Planet. What was it called? Music of the Planets or something?
The Spheres.
Of the Spheres. It was done in the 30s. I think it's very new agey considering it was done in the 30s. But it's how Swami was able to read that poem in the cadence with the music, I'll never know. He could not have scripted that. He did that in fact, he said so. He did it intuitively. And it's just a mind-boggling. So what I'm saying is I realized, both from Swami and Yoganandaji, that creative visualizations were far more part. And if you read, how many here have somewhere, probably never opened, a copy of Yogananda's Yogoda lessons from the 20s? Yeah, when you read those things, it's almost nothing but creative visualizations. And then as I learned and as I practiced, I realized, and when you go out there in the New Age world and the world of learning, you realize that the process of visualizing what you want, let's say, that the creative imagination, Sri Yukteswar said that illness and health enter the body through imagination. This dream of God's is an imagination. And I think those of us on the Kriya path don't really, unless you're maybe more artistically inclined, don't really give full measure to the power of visualization. The truth is, if you introspect to your mind, you will see how often you visualize a person or visualize what it is you have to do. How often we use the power of imagination to guide us and to create and manifest and to accomplish many things in our life. Cooking, all sorts of things. Anyway, so the power of the second chakra, which is the ability, which has the characteristic of wisdom on the 8 aspects, we usually think of it in sexual terms. I'll come to that a little bit later. But it's far less related to procreation than it is creativity, than it is to purity, the flow of water, to clean, to purify, the flow of life force, the flow of inner guidance, and so forth. And so visualization then is the second step. Asana, we all know. There's not much to say about that. But I'll tell you, Swami Kriyananda really rakes over the coals, the Hatha yogis here. Even poor Morley gets it in the face. And Gyandev, the other teachers. In the yoga world, when I say yoga here, I mean Hatha world, they all pretend that yoga comes from Patanjali. That's a straight out lie. There's no Hatha yoga in here. None. And Swami he really is pretty intense about it. So we'll come to that a little bit later. All Patanjali said about asana is sit up straight, you bozo. Be still. Okay? That's all he said. Because here's something I bet you don't know. Most of what we've inherited as Hatha yoga was developed during Kali Yuga. Developed during the time in which yoga was completely associated with the physical body. The very scripture of Hatha Yoga, Hatha Pradipika, I always have a hard time saying that word. There's several scriptures, that's the most famous one. I'm not knocking it. I do yoga 5 or 6 times a week, don't get me wrong. But it doesn't come from the higher ages. Morley has researched this and found that he went back in time to the different scriptures. And as far back as you can go, there were 2 yoga postures. 2. And you know what Swami Kriyananda would say sometimes in our Kriya initiations? I can say this to anybody. He said that if all you did was Mahamudra, and Mahamudra is taught in Hatha, it's not limited to Kriya. If all you ever did was Mahamudra, that's all you would ever need. So it's quite interesting. So Patanjali didn't live at a time when Iyengar or all these other characters lived. That is all relatively modern, okay? I'm not knocking it. I think it's wonderful. Brings a lot of people to the path of meditation. The beauty of asana is that prana has its own intelligence, and a person who goes to a gymnasium or to a yoga studio and does yoga, if they really do it, really get into it, an awakening will tend to happen to that person. They'll become more aware. They'll awaken to themselves. Where that takes them depends on, a lot of other things. But so asana is wonderful. But all Patanjali was saying was sit up straight. Okay? Pranayama we know quite a bit about. The Raja book that Swami Kriyananda gave us, that is my linchpin here today, is filled with all sorts of, Yogananda Swami talked about how, I don't remember the circumstances, I'm not sure Swami ever gave a description of the circumstances, but he describes Yogananda sitting there doing the alternate breath. Okay, and in many traditions, the alternate breath, which is tied in with the astral breath, right? Here, the Pingala, right? We good, is a kind of kriya. In India, they would call that a kriya, because kriya just means technique. It just means sadhana. It just means the word practice, as opposed to bhakti, devotion, let's say, or seva in karma yoga. And so we think of kriya in the very specific terms that our lineage has given us kriyas. But there's all sorts of kriyas. There's talabhya kriya, to stretch your tongue, to do Kechari mudra, right? There's Navi Kriya, which Lahiri put a lot of emphasis on in our Kriya training in Seattle. I do Navi Kriya, the chin lock with the navel, every day. Very powerful technique. So there's all sorts of Kriyas. But anyway, pranayam, prana, life force, yama, control, right? There's all sorts, and we're going to practice a number of variations on alternate breathing here today. And it's throughout the Raja book. Okay. Here's an interesting thing. I have yet to find any straight up reference to the double breath and tensing the body that is so prevalent to our system of energization. Energization was Yogananda's unique contribution, right, to the path of yoga. But I have seen other references. Yogananda was born in the first half, more or less, of the 20th century. That was the period in the state of Bengal, where he was born, in East India, where the sort of Bengali, the Hindu Renaissance, the Bengal Renaissance took place. This was an upsurge in the arts, in the sciences, in the intellectual world, and in the spiritual. Just think, in our lineage alone, all the avatars who were Bengali. And there was Tagore, there was, what was the scientist's name? Bose, yeah. We have no reference to it here in America, but in the little state of Bengal, basically Calcutta, let's face it, in Calcutta, there was, in the first half of the 20th century and the latter part of the 19th, a renaissance of power and energy through all the fields. And there was a physical culture renaissance. And most of you know, don't you, that Bishnu Ghosh, the little younger brother of Yogananda, was the founder of what later became hot yoga in America. One of Bishnu Ghosh's, quote, disciples, students, was the one who created hot yoga. But Bishnu Ghosh, he toured America. I think he came to Princeton, maybe, did some things. Anyway, so Murli has found some books from Bengal in that period of the Renaissance. And there they were doing the double breath. That's what I'm trying to say. But we don't know the origins of it beyond that. But I bet you dollars to donuts. I don't really eat donuts, but you probably don't either. But anyway, I bet you dollars to donuts that there is some earlier source to the double breath. The reason I put so much emphasis on it, because we here put so much emphasis on it, and I'll say more than that, of all the breath techniques associated with Raja Yoga, like the alternate breath, and I love Sitkari Pranayam, with the cooling tongue. The other one, the Sitali Pranayam, a lot of people can't curl their tongue to do that, but almost everybody has a tongue and have teeth. So the Sitka, which I have used when I'm go to India and it's 100 and a million degrees there, I'm sitting in a train or whatever, and I use Sitali Pranayam. Even in Portland, I understand it gets kind of hot. I heard that somewhere. A lot hotter than Seattle, by the way. Anyway, I have used Sitkari Pranayam. Let's try it. Let's sit up straight. Put your tongue behind your front teeth, both of them, whatever. Okay. You got to use your diaphragm to do this because, Close your eyes, focus your mind at the spiritual eye, tongue behind the teeth. Relax and inhale and make a hissing sound nice and slow. Here we go. Now hold the breath just briefly. Now let the exhalation slide out through the nose. We're going to do it again, and this time feel the coolness coming in through the mouth. Close the mouth, hold the breath briefly, exhale through the nose and just let it slip away. One more time. Inhale through the mouth. Close the mouth, hold the breath briefly. Let the breath exhale slip out through the nose. Now just exhale and pause, just hold it and feel. Through the power of imagination, take any feeling of coolness in the mouth and direct it upward into the brain. Cool that overstimulated, overheated brain. Okay, just for fun, I wanted to share that. So you can use Sitkari Pranayam in a cooling way. In the deeper practice, which I very much enjoy, I'll do at least 6 of those. And then with each one, I try to direct my attention. I take that coolness and I direct my attention into the brain and then see it wash down the spine. Sri Yukteswar taught a technique like this, but Master said he chose to ignore it, and he asked Sri Yukteswar's forgiveness. But anyway, it's a great technique, not just in hot climates. I'm talking about when the brain is overstimulated because you've been looking at your phone too long. Okay, nobody here does that, I know, but I've heard people have that problem. Okay, so those pranayams then are very much part of, and we're going to go into the different ones. Now remember, I said that in the tradition there, they wouldn't teach the techniques, but they would teach the precepts. So when we look at the pranayam precepts, when we go through the sutras here in a bit, you're going to see where Patanjali makes numerous references to pranayams. And he gives hints, but it's up to the individual teacher and the student, receptive and so forth, for the actual details. I have read, how many sort of know the name Swami Pranabhananda, the saint with 2 bodies? Okay, from the autobiography. He was, as you may know, a disciple of Lahiri Mahashaya. He was one of the more advanced disciples, along with Ram Gopal Muzumdar. And do you remember in the autobiography that Lahiri, he did keep a journal, and you can get it online now. Lahiri's journal. It's pretty weird, but anyway. But he didn't write any commentaries. Do you remember? Instead, he said to his students to write his commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, and tune into me and then write the commentaries as I have taught you. Well, Swami Pranabhananda, long story short, was one of those. And with Murli's help, he brought back from India for me 2 gigantic volumes of the commentaries by Swami Pranabhananda on the Bhagavad Gita. And they are pretty weird, actually. But people like me, who are also a little bit weird, really love to read this goofy stuff. And I had a reason for saying that. Why did I bring that up? Anyway, I forgot. All that to say is all of these Sri Yukteswar and Lahiri both told people that during their development stages, after Lahiri met Babaji, after Sri Yukteswar, well, actually before Sri Yukteswar was initiated by Lahiri, they both were actively seeking out other swamis, other gurus, whatever. And Lahiri was sort of like Einstein. He was a mad scientist. And he went out and picked up all this Tantra stuff, all this, different traditions. Tantra really comes from Bengal. It comes from that part of India. And I don't mean the dark Tantra. I mean the white Tantra, of which Kriya actually is part. And all of those weird techniques, okay? I mean, Lahiri had that technique. It's in the Raja course, where if you're trying to transmute sexual energy, you take a bag of ice, right? Okay, anybody with me? And you place it there, and you cool that region, that chakra energy, and you start doing deep breathing and offering there. All that stuff is there, okay? And so both Lahiri and then later Sri Yukteswar, who came up with some pretty goofy ideas of his own, they researched this information, and it's really a wrong accusation to say that this lineage diluted the core teachings for the dumb Americans. That's not true. Don't ever believe that. What they did is they stripped a lot of goofy stuff into the very essence of what the most powerful practices, the practice of Kriya, the technique of Om, and as I say, the double breath, which is so powerful for our overstimulated bodies and minds. And so a lot of those pranayamas are in the art and science of yoga. The book and the course. And what Murli has contributed because of his background is most of us, this is what we learn. That's all we know. That's what Swami taught us. And Swami got it from Master. But what he has shown, Murli has been able to show that these techniques come from a very high lineage. You see, the problem is for us who are disciples of Yogananda is we're happy to accept whatever he teaches us, right? I mean, he never said where he got this stuff. Lahiri never said where he got this stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that he got it. He didn't use intuition. That's the thing. We think they're all avatars, so they should know all this stuff. Well, they're human beings. They have to learn how to walk and talk and everything else. So one of the contributions Murli has offered to us, and I'm hoping he will someday write a book or two on it, is to help us, as this lineage grows in popularity throughout the world, is to tie back to the great Indian and yoga tradition, the things that we do, which otherwise to us and to the rest of the world appear to have sprung out of nowhere from this particular lineage, okay? But all these pranayams that are in the Art and Science book are very strongly connected with the yoga tradition of our line of gurus and with Patanjali. Now, the next parts of it, there's not a lot to say about it as we have done, because most of our yoga lives are focused on pranayama, so I wanted to give that some attention. The other ones, pratyahara, is associated more with Hong Sha. Now, Hong Sha is not considered a traditional pranayam because you're not controlling the breath, right? But I have taught this for decades, and all of our other senior teachers have come to the same realization. Hong Sha is as much a pranayam as alternate breathing. Why? Because we control the breath with it. That's why. Every pranayam there is leads us to breathlessness. Well, that's what. Hong Sha is actually a far deeper pranayam than alternate breathing and all these other things. Okay? I won't get into this isn't a thing on Hong Sha, but for now I'll just ask you to think about that. Hong Sha on the spine, Yogananda himself called the baby Kriya. It is a kind of Kriya. And in fact, they just give hints. Yogananda said that when you're done with your Kriya practice, you can practice bhakti yoga, right, he says. And then he says Hong Sa on the spine, doesn't he? And the fact, and Lahiri talks a lot of, he didn't call it Hong Sa, that's the problem. There's nobody who's really put all this together. Someday, somebody a lot smarter than, and a lot more time than I have, and a lot smarter too, will put all this together. But that's for future generations. To unite things like Pranabhananda, who represents Lahiri's tradition, and Satyananda. You can go, did you know that Sri Yukteswar wrote a commentary on the Gita? And the first 8 chapters of which he had approved by Lahiri? But then Lahiri then he had Mahasamadhi, and so he couldn't finish it. So Sri Yukteswar finished it. But you can find it now, it's online. The commentary on the Bhagavad Gita by, I think Satyananda, who Swami met, was one of the core disciples when Yogananda came, before he came to America in 1920. There's a rich body of literature is what I'm alluding to, and it's largely unexplored, okay? And I have taught the Raja course out of the Raja book, as I said, I estimated about 52 times. For many years, I taught it twice a week, all right, at different locations. And I never ceased, all those years, I never ceased to be amazed by some of the profound statements that Swami Kriyananda put into that book. I'll give you one of them, one of my favorites. And it's inspired by Shupatani here. Because we used to go to Padma's course and talk about Kundalini, remember? And Swami Kriyananda gave the most profound definition or description of Kundalini that you will find anywhere on the planet. He said, Kundalini is the entrenched vitality of our mortal delusion. Forget those goddesses and those snakes and all that stuff. That's fine for a different age. We don't think that way. We don't think that much about goddesses and snakes and stuff. That phrase, from a psychological standpoint, from a jnana yoga perspective, from a meditation perspective, the entrenched vitality of our mortal delusion, or our commitment to ego, I'll even simplify it, is far more profound and far more useful to you and I than anything else you'll find on the planet about Kundalini. And it's far more useful, okay? That's just a sentence buried deep in the art and science of Raja Yoga. And there's dozens of sentences like that. I remember I would always read the step before I had to give the class that night, and there were just some things I'd say, I'm not going to talk about that because I don't get it. Not that I didn't get it. I mean, you can talk all you want about anything, but do you really understand what you're talking about? So I'm promoting the art and science because, notwithstanding Pranabhananda and all the stuff that's out there, you actually don't need it. What we've been given through Yoganandaji and through Swamiji's distillation, because as I said, Yogananda did not write anything on the sutras, is so life-changing. They have given us the jewels. The jewel and the lotus, they have given us, okay? And I'm deeply grateful because in all my research, which is just my own inclination and what little time I have in my life for these kinds of pursuits, I have never come across anything as deep, okay? Okay, so the higher stages is basically not what I want to talk about today. Well, Pratyahara is with this center, isn't it? Right, the throat center? Think of the body, okay? The body, we're sort of big down here, right? And then we come up into the physical form, And we come into this narrow isthmus, like the Strait of Gibraltar. And it's through, and we have lots of neck problems, don't we? And even throat problems. And this is the narrow passageway through which we have to go in order to achieve, ultimately, samadhi, but to achieve the higher states, all of which take place, it's all in your head. You've heard that expression, right? All of which takes place, the 3 stages. We don't use this word, but Patanjali uses the word samyama. Sam-yama. S-A-M, samadhi. Same, remember I said same? Yama, control. So samyama he uses to describe the three highest states, which we listed earlier, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, which align with medulla, dharana, dhyana, spiritual eye, samadhi, the crown, or sahasrara chakra. Patanjali uses a word for all 3. He calls it samyama. Yama, control of the same. This is the high. We'll come to that a little bit later. And pratyahara, though, is the bridge to get through this narrow passageway. We need to still and to close off what Yogananda very quaintly called the 5 sense telephones. Anybody remember that expression? I've always sort of smile every time I hear it. Because, in his day, the telephone was a big thing. We have the internet and we have cell phones, but ring, it's like I always think of those old phones I grew up with that were really loud and noxious. Ring! And these 5 sense telephones are going off. And so so this is the calmness. This is the bridge. We have to be able to turn off the stimuli of the 5 senses in order to enter really the holy of holies. This is the true temple. I don't want to. The heart is. I don't want to get into all that stuff right now. But anyway, the samyama, the stages, take place here. Okay. So pratyahara then is the bridge, the calming bridge by which the ego-active tendencies and the outer stimuli become to quiet. Now think of it this way. Yama and niyama are the basis for all spiritual teachings. Most churches and most church-type people preach and teach, thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that, right? Most of the world of high-mindedness, of virtue, most virtue is associated with yama, niyama, the do's and the don'ts. And those, getting your act together in your life on a level of, cleanliness and virtue and morality and ethics and boundaries and all those good things are the base, the foundation. It is earth and water, right? Earth center, Muladhara, right? Coccyx, and water. And then we start meditation. The inner path begins with asana. That's why Patanjali said, sit still, you bozo. He didn't actually have the word bozo in there, but I think it's kind of there. Anyway, so in other words, the real path of the 8-limbed path begins with being able to sit still, to withdraw from outward sense activities and involvements. So this has to do with stilling the body. This has to do stilling the emotions. This has to do with stilling the mind. Do you see the 3? Body, emotions, and mind. And those are the necessary stages before you can enter the astral body. That's what we're talking about. These have to do with calming, to some degree, the astral body in terms of the mind and the emotions, which is the astral body. But these are necessary in order to what ultimately is the causal body. Now, I'm going to do a little segue. What I'm trying to do is show us, to point out how deeply embedded what we practice here at Ananda is into the Eightfold Path, into Patanjali. Can anybody, I've been teaching meditation for decades. I bet there's some meditation teachers here. Can one of our meditation teachers tell me what are the 3 stages of meditation? Michael?
Relaxation.
Right?
Concentration. Expansion.
Exactly. Relaxation, concentration, and expansion. I'm going to tell you something you may have never thought about. Physical, astral, causal. Relaxation is what we're talking about here on the Eightfold Path. It's relaxing your involvement with the world around you and then relaxing the physical body. Physical. Concentration. Concentration of the mind is to relax the astral body, is to get into the astral body of consciousness, focus the mind so that the emotions can settle down and the thoughts can subside. And what happens in the 3rd stage of meditation? We go beyond our techniques, don't we? Whatever techniques we've been practicing in the phase of concentration, and a little bit maybe in relaxation, ends. After the practice of Kriya, right? Master says to sit in the silence. He says that's the most important stage of meditation. It's when intuition is developed. That's the causal body. It's beyond thoughts. I mean, it's supposed to be. I mean, probably for you it is, but I still struggle with it. But that's what we're doing. We're withdrawing from the physical body. We're withdrawing from the astral body. The astral body is the seat of ego. The causal body is the seat of the soul. And it's beyond thoughts. That's what we're doing. That's the Eightfold Path. Physical, astral, causal. Now, the causal body is not samadhi, as for some of you who are more technical about these things. And as I said, I'm not going to talk about samadhi, so forget it. But anyway, it is the necessary stage. The causal body is dhyana. Since I'm just reviewing this quickly, we're going to come back to this later, but dharana, I just need to finish what I was doing. Dharana is when our eyes are closed, the body is still, and really focused in meditation, and we're beginning to have initial glimpses. It's actually more than this, but we're at least beginning to feel peaceful. Maybe we are, if we're practicing the Om technique or not, maybe we hear Om. Different things are starting to come to us that Patanjali calls astral perceptions. And again, I'm going to come back to that. So dharana is the initial perception of subtler realities. Dhyana, which is usually translated by most people from India, dhyana is translated as meditation, which isn't very helpful to us. Our word meditation is sort of blah. It doesn't really, it's sort of like the word love. I mean, I wish we were like Eskimos and had a million words for the word love. We only have one. It means things from one end of the spectrum to the other, but same thing with meditation. After all, I can meditate on something and think about it, right? So the word's not very helpful. So really, dhyana is much more like expansion or absorption. Dhyana is when my observation of being peaceful becomes peaceful. Dhyana is that stage of experience where words because when we talk and think, we have a noun, a verb, and an object. It's by nature dual, with the verb connecting the duality. So when we come to dhyana, there's no thought that I am feeling peaceful. It's simply peace. It's not as if I has checked its luggage at the cloakroom or something. It's not if you have a meditation and you come back and say, wow, that was great, I don't know where I was. If you don't know where you were, you weren't there. You have to be present to win, as I like to joke. In other words, nobody comes out of a higher stage of meditation not knowing what happened, okay? Because in a higher stage of dhyana, you are more aware than you ever are in the physical body. On the other hand, you can check out, and you probably have. You know, there is something called a trance state. Yogananda talked about in his early lessons. You can induce a trance state by pressing on certain nerves. That's like being chloroformed or I can't say that word, anesthetized. Anyway, so yeah, those states of consciousness do exist, but you're not conscious. Okay, so I'm not talking about that. So whenever that does happen to you, you had a wonderful daydream about something or other, that ain't meditation. That's all I got to say. So dhyana really is that powerful state of tremendous wakefulness, but which the I principle isn't sitting there chattering and taking notes and can't wait to tell my friends about what I did in meditation. So.